Hey guys, good morning. This is Tony, and it is my Work with a Pro series continuation. And today I've got the pleasure of having Paul Fitz join us. Paul is a pro, he's a professional mortgage originator with deep experience. A lot of people ask me, say, Tony, what do you mean when you talk about a pro or a professional? So for me, a professional has got four traits, and Paul exhibits all four. First is the necessary skills. Second is the necessary training. Third is the necessary experience. And fourth, which is the most important, is the necessary desire to help within their field of influence. So Paul, with that, you are a mortgage originating professional. How long have you been in the game?
I've been doing this for 23 years now, Tony.
Awesome. So you've been around the block.
Couple times. Yeah, I've seen it.
And I view a pro as somebody that can anticipate friction points or hurdles or speed bumps, as well as navigate those hurdles and speed bumps when you get to them. And I know you've got a lot of experience. For the audience, Paul and I have done a lot of business together. The reason we do business together is he is, as I said, a pro. Paul, where are you at right now? What company are you with?
I'm with Advantage Lending. It's a local company here in Raleigh, and I've been with them for about 4 years now.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And you know, I'm a big fan. Lindecraft Team Realtors is a big fan of being local, shop local. So Paul is one of my favorite go-to lenders, and we're privileged to have him on today. So Paul, I reached out to you with not a whole lot of advance notice. And the reason was that there was a publication that just came out, and it was talking about rents. And I'm looking away just for a second. It was talking about the current rent structure and what the average, or the median rent is in the Triangle MLS, which is a very large area. And the rent number is $2,075 is the median rent. Okay. And what's interesting, compared to the third quarter of 2021, that number is up from $1,950. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, and that's for a single family home. For an attached home, which is a townhouse or a condominium typically, that rent growth has been even higher. It's $1,900 as of August of this year compared to $1,650. Okay, that's $250 more every month for the joy of not owning a home.
That's even double what the single family expansion has been. I mean, it was $125 difference from year over year on the single family. That's $250 difference year over year on the townhouse.
Yep. And that's what you want with a mortgage professional. You want somebody that can do math on the fly without a calculator. But no, very true. And then the other reason I wanted to broach it is there's a lot of news and a lot of headlines about recession, this, inflation, that, rising price, this. And then also a lot of fear being emerged in the industry, or in the, I should say the news, about housing. And is housing a bubble? Is it not a bubble? And I know you've got experience, I've got experience. And what I thought I would do is pick your brain a little bit. I'm a huge fan of home ownership when it's the right time for you. And I am also one that gets a little put off when fear causes people to miss out on opportunity. And human nature allows us often to stay with the known rather than take the risk of the unknown. And buying a home, be it your first home or your third home or your 10th home, always has, a change aspect to it, which could equate to risk. But let's start off with Paul. What are your thoughts on home buying now versus waiting it out for a year or two?
Every time somebody brings a question to me about when to buy, my answer has always been the same. It's what's going on in your life. What makes sense in your life? If you should buy now, you should buy now. It shouldn't be an interest rate driven narrative. It shouldn't be a price driven narrative. If you continue to rent, all you're doing is paying somebody else's mortgage, no matter how much that rent is. But if you buy a property, even now in what we consider to be an interest rate spike time period, if you buy a house now, you may be feeling, wow, I bought with a high rate, but you should know that going into it, you can always refinance that rate down to a lower payment on your house. You can never do that with rent. You can never negotiate rent down. So I always talk about what their personal needs are. I told somebody the other night at an event we were at, I said, my job is the same as being the equivalent of a doctor, a lawyer, and a salesperson all at the same time. But the doctor side of me, I want to diagnose each client that we have by their personal needs.
Well, let's dive into that. And that's super helpful, because let's use that rent number. Let's use that $2,075 a month. And let's use me as a case study, Paul. Let's say I'm in my mid 30s, which I'm not. Let's say I'm pretty secure in my.
You're pretty close, right?
Yeah.
30, yeah.
Yeah. Let me say I'm in my pretty comfortable with my career. Yep. I've got a good income history. I've got a good perception of my income profile going forward.
Right.
I've got a sense of what I like out of a house. I may not have thought through what my life might be like in the next 3 to 5 years, which is always a question I ask folks when they're buying homes.
Good question.
But hey, Paul, wouldn't I just be better off renting for another year? I mean, it's only $2,075 a month. What would that mean in terms of a mortgage payment?
Depending on what somebody's going to put down in this era of where mortgage rates are, if somebody was going to put down like a minimum of 3%, they're probably looking at about a 300, maybe 305 house, depending on where they're looking at. But if they put down 3% on a $300,000 property, their payment is going to be close to $2,075, maybe $2,100, maybe $2,150, depending on taxes, insurance, depending on all the factors involved in the payment. But also remember, if a person buys now, they can also do an interest write-off, on their taxes the following year, which would then make that payment less than $2,075 a month. So in essence, they wouldn't be losing money. They'd actually be gaining money in the process.
Yeah, that's super helpful. One of the ways I think about it too, as a real estate professional, and I've been a renter, I've been a homeowner, I used to be a banker, is I look at what's called rent equivalent. And I look at what my rent is versus what my mortgage payment would be, principal and interest. For the audience, Paul looks at it a little more detailed, which is what a homeowner should do, or somebody looking to buy a home, is add in whether or not you have escrows for taxes, insurance, depending on the money you put. Yep. And depending on the money you put down, do you have mortgage insurance and things like that? But let's use the analogy Paul just talked about. If you have a solid credit history, if you have a solid income history, and you have a solid desire on what you want to do, you could possibly buy a $300,000 house for $9,000 down on down payment. I mean, that's a pretty convincing profile. What's interesting is when I looked at the MLS this morning, and Paul and I didn't talk about these numbers yet, I always look at what the active homes are and the coming soon homes in our market. Those are the homes that are available for people to purchase. Right now, as of this morning, there's 7,100 homes in the Triangle MLS, which is a very large market.
I'm writing this down, by the way.
Yep, 7,100. That's active and coming soon. Of that amount, the ones that are priced from 300,000 to 400,000, there's almost 1,800. So there are 1,800 options. That may not sound like a lot to folks, but again, we're just talking about the homes that are available as of this morning, and there's more houses that come on and off all the time. So Paul, I've never had a mortgage before, and a lot of people are telling me, don't buy now because rates are high. Based on your 20 plus years of experience, do rates always stay high and then just keep going up?
No. And truthfully, I'm a person who follows the markets. I follow the charts. We are still on what we call a 40-year down escalator on rates, but this is the highest interest rate spike that we've seen in that 40-year cycle. People don't want to get into the minutia of why, but there are a lot of economic factors involved to make this spike the way it is. But I believe personally we've come off the peak of inflation. And in doing that, I think now that you've seen the peak of inflation, you will see interest rates decline. But the decline in rates will not be as rapid as this spike. So it may take a year. It may take a 2-year cycle. But after that 2-year cycle, we're probably going to see interest rates back in the fours.
All right, let me go back over that. So when rates go up on the mortgage side, they tend to go up rather quickly.
Rapidly.
When they come down, they sort of plateau and then they sort of stair step down, right? It's an escalator up and it's a long, slow staircase down, correct?
Correct.
And you just threw a nugget at me, but I want to make sure I capitalize on that. So if I had to borrow today and I had to borrow at 6.25% for 30 years fixed,
correct.
But in 2 years, your predictions are correct and my rate's closer to 4, what's that do for me on my mortgage payment?
You know, depending on the price of the property and also depending on if a person had mortgage insurance at the time that they purchased the property. We could go into percentages of what they could save every month, but honestly, it's the equivalent to a car payment. It could be a car payment that's $500, $600 a month, but they could save that money monthly and they could do it within a span of 2 years. They could drop their PMI and they could also get a lower rate, which would also, you know, again, encompasses a much lower payment.
Gotcha. And then one of the things I like to throw out at people, and by the way, that car payment, that's a pretty nice car. That's a new Ford Bronco. That might be part of a Tesla. I mean, that's real money, right?
It's your EV. That's right.
But you told me earlier, I can't go to my landlord and say, hey, cut my rent $500 a month.
They won't do it. They'll find another warm body for the house.
And I think your knowledge of history and mine are pretty similar. Rents rarely go down systemically. They may ebb and flow a little bit, but they usually have an upwards trajectory.
And it depends on the market. And Raleigh's market is one of the hottest in the country right now. It's not declining anytime soon. We have, I don't know, we have 80 people moving to Raleigh every single day. It's not going to slow down anytime soon. Rents will not decline.
And for the audience as well, I'm like-minded on that. I think there's enough pressure on affordable housing. There's enough pressure on migration into the Triangle area from job employment and people relocating that there's just not enough supply of quality rental housing, let alone rental housing on its own. We do have a increasing supply of quality homes that can be owned. And there's a whole nother factor that goes into home ownership. It's the pride of ownership. It's the other things. But Paul, you and I talked just briefly before we got on this call about what you're seeing with buyers that are taking out mortgages through you on the competitive nature of the market. How does the August looking into September market for a buyer feel compared to the January, February, March period of this year?
That's a great question because I would say March was the slowdown or the end of where we were seeing the bidding wars, where 40 or 50 people would go out and look at the same property and bid 10, 20, 30, 40, $100,000 over the list price of the property. There were at-risk factors at that time. If somebody bid $100,000 over that property, the property didn't appraise, then they were on the hook for $100,000 over asking. But now interest rates have slowed the market down. And I think anybody who is looking in the March or April timeframe, or even prior to that, if they're interested in finding a house that suits their lifestyle, that suits all of their needs, they should acquire that property now, knowing they're only going to pay $500 or $600 more for it every month versus $100,000 for it in advance up front right now, which is what they were doing in the prior market. I call it a different market, but it's true. Our market is a pendulum. It swings, and it's definitely swung the other way. So this is a buying opportunity in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree as well in the context of all the things we've talked about. And I always like to put history on it because one of the benefits of having gray hair like me and age like Paul, because we both
have hair. That's good.
We've both been around the block a long time. Is when you apply history, there's a couple things I'll throw out, and I'm sure Paul will have a reaction, is, oh my God, 6.25% is really expensive. I shouldn't buy a house. I don't know, Paul, what's the average interest rate on a credit card?
Oh, 18, 19%. It's not palatable at all. Even car payments, depending on what your credit scores are on your car rate, They could be 18, 19, even 27% I've seen on people's car loans.
And credit cards, usually the stuff you buy with the credit card and usually that car, do not go up in value. Is that a true statement?
Pretty much never.
And the reason I bring that up is my first home loan was 7.5% fixed. And we're not going to dive into it today, but if you are on the fence about buying, or if the interest rates are, just a little bit challenging for your budget, I would say reach out to Paul, and we'll get you his contact info in a second, because there are different mortgage products out there. There is what's called a 5/1 adjustable rate mortgage, affectionately referred to as an ARM. And that was my first loan in 1993. Wow. So there are ways to get into home ownership that aren't as punitive compared to history if you look back. And that's what a lot of people do, unfortunately. You look back a year ago, 2 years, and shoulda, woulda, coulda. Don't beat yourself up over that. Just look at what your situation is today. Also, historically, if you look at the triangle, and if you look at Wake County in particular, which is the largest sort of geography from the standpoint of housing units, our average appreciation rate in 2015 to 2019 was 6.3%.
Wow.
Median home price appreciation every year.
Right.
And there isn't anything I see, and I don't think there's anything that Paul sees that would suggest deterioration in home values. You seeing anything, Paul?
No, I mean, the properties are still appraising. They're still going for pretty much close to purchase price. I will say that real estate agents are working a little bit harder on loan transactions, or purchase transactions, because during that time period of the $50,000 due diligence, $100,000 over asking, the listing agent was less likely to negotiate repairs. Now I'm seeing listing agents negotiate repairs and even paying some closing costs because of it.
Yep. And that's more of a normal market, right? When a market is balanced and there's equal supply demand, there's always a negotiation happens, as opposed to the market that we went through most of 2021 into the first couple months of 2022, started midpoint of 2020. That actually was not a normal market. A one-sided negotiation is not a normal real estate market. A take it or leave it approach. I got to put all this money at risk. That was actually, and I think, Paul, you'd agree, that was a very scary time for buyers, regardless of their experience level.
It should have been a little more scary. I will admit, a lot of people just jumped right into it. There were a lot of first-time home buyers in that market. And again, now because rates have creeped up, everybody's taking a stance back. But I want people to look also not at the current state, but also their future state when they do that. And Tony, whenever you have a client or anybody out there who's even thinking about buying, if you want to take a look at a property right now and what the payment will be with taxes and insurance, mortgage insurance, and what the current rate is, hey, great, I will give you that payment today. But I'll also help you look in the future and say, hey, let's look at 2 years from now. Your house is appreciated in value. You don't have mortgage insurance anymore. And let's see what the payment will look like at 4.5% or 4.25% or 4%. If those payments are more palatable to you at that time, you should go ahead and buy that property, knowing that that's what's going to be your future. I give the equivalent to say, yes, your payment now is probably a car payment higher, but remember, you're only going to have that car payment for about 24, 25 months. If you go out and buy a new car now, you'll have that payment for 8 years.
Mm-hmm. And let's just say Paul's wrong, which he's not usually wrong, unless he bets against Notre Dame football. But if he's wrong, a fixed rate mortgage, Paul, what happens with your mortgage payment when interest rates go up?
When mortgage rate, I'm sorry, say that again.
So if you have a fixed rate mortgage,
correct,
and
nothing
rates
happens.
Go up,
nothing happens. You don't have to refinance. You can stand pat.
Your housing costs are fixed, and housing costs are probably people's largest outflow on a monthly basis.
Correct.
All right, Paul, thank you so much for your time. How could somebody reach you if they wanted to talk with a true mortgage pro?
Well, thanks, Tony, and thanks for having me today. If you want to reach out to me, It's P, and then my last name is Fitz, PFITTS at advantagelending.com. That's pfitz at advantagelending.com, or call me. My cell phone is 919-612-0043. I don't just work from 9 to 5. Tony will attest that if you want me after hours or even weekends, I'm always glad to help his clients, all the LCT clients. I'm glad to help out.
I appreciate that, Paul, very much. And as Paul said, he'll run different analytics for you. He's got the knowledge and the experience to have different options. And then if you're watching this, hopefully you are a follower of me on YouTube, which is Anthony Fink, Fink Real Estate. Fink Real Estate. And then you can always reach me at 919-986-4146. The professionals at Lindecraft Team Realtors. We're local, like Advantage Lending is local. We live in the community. We love the community, and we're here to help. And Paul, didn't you have one other nugget of wisdom because you lost a bet with me? What is Notre Dame's football winning percentage?
Notre Dame's football winning percentage is 73%. And that's 929 wins, 331 losses, 42 ties. Although I do remember, I think they're still 2-1 to NC State. So NC State has 2 wins. Notre Dame only has 1. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We'll have to check GPA ratings or something. Oh. All right, guys, we wish everyone a wonderful day, and don't let fear guide you either direction. Be thoughtful about what you do when it comes to your housing decisions and your financial futures. Thank you so much.
Thank you.